Chapter 1. Druscilla! My mother's voice startled me awake. She was bending over me, her expression so distressed that I felt a pang of alarm. I raised myself on my elbows, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "What is it, Mama?" "Oh, my dear, we have just had the most dreadful news. Allaire is dead!" Her wide, dark eyes grew suddenly bright with tears. Fully awake now, I sat up. "Dead? Allaire? But how?" My cousin was only 26, just 6 years older than I, and in the prime of radiant young womanhood. "We don't know all the details. We just got word. Some kind of accident." She began turning back the bedcovers. "You must get up at once. There really is no time to lose, Drew. We must leave for Mayfield as soon as possible. Garnet will send a carriage to meet us at the station." Mama's hands shook as she handed me a cup of coffee to drink while I tried to absorb this shattering news. "I must arrange for Auntie Nell's care while we are gone. Poor soul, she's quite distraught. But at her age, the train trip and funeral would be too much. Now hurry, dear. I've sent Bessie to the train station to see when the next train is leaving, and we must be on it." My mother left the room, and I got shakily to my feet. I couldn't seem to gather my wits. All that had registered was the stunning announcement that my cousin was dead. I glanced at my open trunk, half-packed, standing in the corner. I was to leave for my new teaching post at Thornycroft School in Massachusetts at the end of the week. Dazedly, I moved toward it. Had I packed anything that would be suitable for a funeral? Funeral! Allaire's funeral! The unreality of it rolled over me in a fresh wave of grief, and I was wrenched back 8 years to a happier day. I could hear Allaire's voice. "But of course Drusilla's going to be in my wedding. She will wear the loveliest dress of pink ruffled lawn with a pink satin sash and carry pink roses. It will be perfect with her dark hair and beautiful eyes. Oh, Aunt Dove, you can't say no." If there had been any doubt in Mama's mind that I should be one of Allaire's bridal attendants, it vanished in that moment. No one had ever been able to deny Allaire anything she was set on having. I never quite understood why. Even at age 12, I knew that Allaire's engagement to Randall Bondurant had caused a flurry of controversy throughout our plantation community. There had been strong feelings as to whether or not any of our family should even attend the wedding, much less participate in it. I remember the buzz of speculation among the older family members when the announcement came. "Not suitable at all. Well, he is from an old Charleston family, but disowned, I'm told. Something about a duel? No, but he was expelled from the Citadel. Some boyish prank, I suppose. Gambling, my dear." Shocked gasps all around. "Besides, he's 10 years older, and as rich as Croesus." The last was uttered with a certain respect. "What do Harmony and Clinton say?" "What can they say? They've always spoiled the girl outrageously." "Yes, she is willful and headstrong. But what can a young lady do in these times, these circumstances?" Again, a round of heavy sighing. "The truth and pity of it is that so many of our gallant young men perished in the war." "The war?" There was a consensus of nods. Then someone said, "Well, at least she will live at Montclair." "Bon chance," corrected another. "Good luck indeed," was the final cryptic comment. I knew that the reason for all the debate was an old family scandal, one that was spoken of in whispers, although it was an open secret in Mayfield. Randall Bondurant now lived on the estate that had been Montrose property for generations, ever since it was built on an original king's grant in the 1700s, until it was lost to Bondurant in a card game by my Uncle Malcolm. I had grown up at Montclair with my cousins, Allaire Chance and Jonathan Montrose, and our mothers, who decided to move in together for the sake of safety and joint strength, while our fathers were off fighting in the war. So of course I was pleased when Bondurant restored the house and gardens to their antebellum splendor, and was thrilled to learn that the wedding would be held there. Certainly Allaire was beside herself with excitement, and even the name change didn't concern her in the least. "I think it's absolutely the most romantic thing a man ever did," she trilled as we were being fitted for our dresses. "To combine my last name and his for our new home. Oh, we shall be so happy. I know it. What's more," she dimpled and winked in a conspiratorial manner, "I think I deserve some credit for getting the place back into the family, no matter what it's called." And she tossed her beautiful head in the careless way she had. At that point, I didn't care what our relatives said either. I thought Randall Bondurant was dashing and handsome, and Allaire the luckiest girl in the world. I adored Allaire, always had, ever since those days at Montclair when she had so often declared herself the leader of our trio, teasing Jonathan and me if we lagged behind in any of her reckless games, climbing trees, wading in the creek, playing in the woods. If she were our self-appointed queen, the two of us were her willing subjects. And on the few occasions when we dared to question her leadership, she said she should lead because she was the oldest. Actually, it was because she knew how to charm and manipulate to get her way even then, and we gladly agreed just for the privilege of playing with her. Lost in my memories of those carefree days, I was still standing in my nightgown, my cup of untasted coffee in my hand, when Mama came back into the bedroom. "Not dressed yet? Darling, do hurry. Our train leaves at 1. Shall I help?" "No, thank you, Mama. I'll manage. It's just that somehow I can't believe it yet. That Allaire is really dead." "I know, darling." Mama took the cup from me and set it down, then hugged me. "I understand just how you feel." And I knew she did. Tragedy was no stranger to her. Loss, loneliness, poverty had been her lot. Raised in wealth, destined for a life of luxury and leisure, she had been widowed at 20, her father's fortune wiped out. With a child to support, Dove Randall Montrose had no choice but to survive. She had taught school, worked as a seamstress, and now lived with our elderly relative, Nell Perry, as the old woman's housekeeper companion. As I looked into my mother's once beautiful face, it seemed even lovelier to me than the pictures of her painted when she was younger. Now there was an inner beauty shining through, the kind that only strength, courage, and compassion can give. "Now, dear, we really must hurry." She gave me another hug and left me to make my hasty preparations for the trip. Although it was only early September, the day was overcast, and a chill, sharp wind tugged at our skirts and whipped our bonnet strings as we followed the flower-banked casket up to the hilltop Montrose family graveyard above the house once known as Montclair. Standing at Allaire's gravesite in the Montrose family hilltop cemetery, I couldn't help thinking of the irony. The last time all the family had gathered was at her wedding 8 years earlier. Death seemed much more cruel to have taken one so young and beautiful. I looked at Allaire's husband across the yawning chasm of the grave. Randall's head was bowed, his broad shoulders slumped. The 2 little girls stood on either side of him, holding his hands. Allaire's children, I thought, feeling my throat tighten. With their long, fair hair and delicate features, they looked remarkably like her as a child. But the eyes? Oh, the eyes were Bondurant's, large and dark, now filled with an expression of bewildered sadness. At 7 and 5, these little ones had no idea of the enormity of their loss. Because Randall and Allaire had traveled a great deal, and because of our circumstances, I saw my cousin only rarely after her marriage. At first, she appeared unexpectedly at Montclair, fashionably dressed, and bringing gifts and her own unique brand of joie de vivre that evoked so many fond remembrances. But not recently. None of us had seen Allaire in nearly 2 years. My eyes traveled around the group of mourners. Beside my mother stood Aunt Garnet, elegant in a black veil suit and wearing a stylish bonnet that did not completely hide her still glorious red-gold hair. She had known her share of sorrow, and even though she was now married to a wealthy publisher and kept houses in both New York and London, she had buried her first hero husband, my Uncle Bryce, in this same cemetery, and surely must be thinking of him today. Next to Garnet was her mother, Kate Cameron, tall, regal, still beautiful in her 60s. I could detect few scars of the long, hard years of struggle. I felt a rush of warmth. This woman had been like a grandmother to me. After the war, Kate had opened in her home an exclusive school for young ladies and asked Mama to be one of the teachers. So we moved to Cameron Hall, where I had been able to receive the same fine education and cultural advantages that the daughters of the nouveau riche Yankee families had to pay for mightily. Then my eyes rested on the small, dignified figure of my mother, with her cameo features and silver hair. I saw the sympathy on her face as she looked at Randall, and I followed her glance. At that very moment he lifted his head, and I saw his eyes like 2 burning coals in his ravaged face. For a few seconds our gazes locked, and I saw the raw grief there. I drew in my breath. Then I saw something in his expression that frightened me, and I turned quickly away. At last the service was over, and the line of mourners filed through the black iron lace gate of the cemetery fence, winding through velvety manicured lawns back toward the mansion. I could not help thinking that these had been the untended meadows where Jonathan, Allaire, and I had once romped and played. By the time we arrived at the house, Bondurant and the children had disappeared up the steps. I swallowed my disappointment. I had so wanted to get a closer look at those forlorn little girls, perhaps offer them some comfort.
"Please try to understand. The man's broken-hearted,"
Uncle Clinton tried to explain.
"It happened so suddenly that none of us—"
He cleared his throat.
"But you will come to our house, won't you? Harmony needs—"
His voice trailed away as he looked toward his heavily veiled wife, who, supported by her maid, was being handed into their carriage.
"Of course we understand, Clint."
Garnet hushed him with a restraining hand on his arm.
"We'll be along presently."
Once in her carriage on the way to the Chance home, however, she raised an eyebrow.
"You would think Randall Bondurant might have stayed long enough to accept our condolences." "You heard Clinton, Garnet. He said Randall was too depressed to speak to anyone,"
Kate put in mildly.
"Yes, but we're family after all." "Well, we really have not been much family to him, my dear. None of us ever really accepted him," Kate reminded her, "nor received him, for that matter."
Since the truth could not be disputed, no further comments were made. As we rounded the bend of the drive leaving Montclair, I turned to look back. I would have loved to have gone inside and walked through the house I had known so well as a child, a house where I had been very happy. I wondered if Allaire had been happy there. As I was taking that last lingering look, a sudden brisk wind sent a scatter of golden leaves spinning from the elm trees that lined the drive. I shivered. It seemed the symbol of the end of a golden era of my life. I felt I would never see my childhood home again.